Hello, everyone. My name is Nim Grinvald. It is my distinct pleasure today to introduce you to our timeline chart workshop presented by me and my colleagues at Kintone. Okay, so if you went ahead and you clicked on the link for the code in the slides, you'll be taken to a GitHub gist. You'll go ahead and you will click on this download zip to download everything. If you want to pick off the specific files you want, you can go ahead and scroll down and pick them off as we go along. To sign up for your developer account, okay, make sure you are using Chrome or Firefox. Do not use Safari. It won't work. You'll have trouble and you'll want to keep up later. So don't use Safari, and then make sure that you accept cookies. If you are like me, you aggressively reject all cookies except ones that are on your plate. Don't do that this time, though. This time you really need those cookies. And thank you, Sabrina, for posting that item in the chat. Genji or Will are going to take good care of you. All right, so you'll sign up for a developer account, and then you're going to create a Kintone subdomain. Don't use any special characters. Just stick with lowercase numbers and hyphens. Weekend-hacker. What we're going to make today. So we're going to create a timeline chart, and it's going to look like this. It's going to be using a data visualization library, and we'll be displaying all of the 46 U.S. presidents in the history of the United States. All right. What are you really here for, though? This has nothing to do with US presidents. It's no server data visualization. We're here to build a timeline chart. If you are a front-end developer, if you want to spend less time setting up your back-end infrastructure, if you want to concentrate on your UI or UX, this is for you. If you want to learn about JavaScript and you want an easy entry point to understanding libraries and the tools that are out there to make your building experience easier, this is for you. You're in the right place. So, a little bit about me. I went through a coding bootcamp that I don't even think is around anymore. It got bought up by another coding bootcamp. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on in that industry. Gatsby is static, JavaScript builder. Yes, that's fair enough. I'm flashing back to my time with WordPress doing PHP stuff. You're absolutely right. Hack Reactor is a coding bootcamp. I did that for 14 weeks and then went into a sales engineering role. I applied for 141 jobs. Almost like 90% of them were software engineering roles. I think the remaining like 7% were product manager roles, and another 3% were sales engineering roles. And I didn't know what sales engineering was at the time. Turns out that when you want to buy a piece of software and you call up a software company and you say, I want to do this and this and this and this, if your requests are sophisticated, then the salesperson on the other end of the line will say, hey, those are really great questions. I'd like to bring on an engineer, an expert who can talk you through our product and how it can help you. And those folks are called sales engineers. You may also hear them called solutions engineers, pre-sales engineers. There's a lot of different ways to call them in the industry. It was a role I fit in very well. I found it really intellectually stimulating, and I love being with people, as you might have noticed already. So I got promoted. I became the lead sales engineer. I then ended up managing a sales engineering team. I discovered like management isn't for me. That was a weird thing for me to learn because I grew up very much sort of wanting to climb the ladder or the hierarchy or something that I just something that I some expectation that I inherited, and I had to begin to get responsible for if I'm going to live my best life, I better find a job that I really like, and managing a team of engineers is not the thing. So I shifted into a role as a technical evangelist. And in this role, I create possibilities with people, like what's possible with our platform if you're a customer, what's possible with our platform if you're a coder, if you're looking to, if you're a business operations person, I talk about what's possible and how we can help. That I love that, and I love sharing about that. So if you're going into coding and you feel like you have to be a software engineer because that's all that there is, I want you to know you've got options. Going to a coding boot camp was like 14 weeks of getting shot at by a fire hose of information, only to find out a month or two later that actually I retained more than I expected, and it was like I discovered that I knew another language that I didn't know for 6 months prior. So got a lot of value out of it, mostly after I had had the time to let it sink in and do my exercises and apply to jobs and stuff. And that was really the coolest part about it. Okay, let's talk about today's agenda. This is what you're here for. We're going to first get the big picture. Why are we here? We're then going to show you how to create a Kintone app, which you'll do. It'll be hands-on. And then we'll show you how to incorporate data visualization into Kintone. And then we'll talk about how you can call REST APIs from Kintone. So why are we doing that? So that you can have a really easy to build backend, and you've got a data visualization library that can sit on there. And then if you need to pipe in data from other sources so that you can display it with that data visualization, you'll now have holographically all of the parts that you'll need to do that. Okay, so let's talk about the big picture. So where I want to start with the big picture is I want to talk about the traditional scope of data analytics. And I want to do it because I'm going to challenge some assumptions over here that are mostly, well, if they're unstated assumptions. By virtue of something being an assumption, it's typically unstated. So when you're doing data analytics, you're typically concerned with the following things: making data look pretty, making the data easy to understand, being able to generate actionable insights from that data. But there's something that gets lost in that picture, and that's about sharing the insights effectively. So what do I mean by that? Well, think about where you've got your data, right? Typically, and just like a typical workday in front of a computer, you've got your data in a whole bunch of places. Excel, some databases, Dropbox, Google Drive, Slack, Google Docs, some other specific web applications. There's applications that you're using to handle data, like where the files are. And then there's applications that you're using to handle the communication, like the data about the data, the conversations about the data. And the conversations about the data and the data are all over the place. So you've got information that's not being shared effectively. You're not sure where the conversation is happening. This setup creates a surprising amount of overhead and makes it and is problematic from a data analytics perspective, because we assume that, well, once we've got good actionable insights, we can just, we've solved the problem. We've disseminated the information appropriately. But actually, if you're really committed to delivering on the promise of data analytics, then what you're looking for is like something that'll get you from A to Z, right? Something like I can pull out the insights that I need in a way that's easy to understand and easy to and that looks good, and that they're also easy to share, that ultimately these actionable insights are going to get consumed very easily as well. Because if there are barriers to entry in the consumption of data or the consumption of these actionable insights, you have a problem. You have friction in what you're ultimately interested in delivering in what you're ultimately interested in delivering. So this is one of the things that makes Kintone very special, is that you've got the data and the conversations about the data all in one place. And so Kintone is a platform. It's a low code, no code platform. It makes it easy for teams to collate data, to share that data, to collaborate on that data in a way that is robust for and it's robust. People come and go, but your data and your conversations about the data stay in the same place, right? Figure in a typical job, easily 75% of what of your information is stored on email somewhere, right? And then people come and go on the job every time. Someone leaves, it's an inbox that gets shut down. It's intellectual property that leaves. This is a really big problem from a business perspective. How do we ensure the continuity of our knowledge? And so again, it's not just the data, it's the conversations. And that applies from a data analytics perspective as well. And it's not something that's typically talked about because it's outside of the scope of what we would typically consider to be data analytics. We almost assume it's a solved problem that we're going to have actionable insights, and then of course they're going to get disseminated. That's not the case. Or it's, at the very least, it's not something we should just assume. So when you put those two parts together, you remove friction. So you've got what you see in front of you is like a sample Kintone page. You've got data, you've got like record information on the left-hand side. Then you have a conversation, which is people tagging each other in a, tagging each other in a way that allows them to reference what they're seeing and the maintain a record of everything that's relevant to this record. Another thing that you can do with Kintone is you can establish a workflow. So we're going to create something called an app. Okay, you can imagine an app as like a table in a database or a spreadsheet in a workbook, but what we're really talking about is processes. We're talking about workflows. We're talking about taking the workflow, like stuff that a business person tracks. I track expense reports. I track help desk tickets. I track whatever it is, and to make sure that as an item gets tracked through a workflow, that the right people are seeing it at the right time, and that you can branch that workflow at the right, appropriately. That's a key benefit of our platform. And so, as I mentioned, the apps are the building blocks of our platforms, and what we can do with it, and this is what makes it super cool, is you can drag and drop fields from a palette onto a canvas, and then edit those fields in a GUI. So the reason why that's awesome is because as a developer, like I imagine you are or are interested in becoming or have some kind of some kind of an investment in, you can build stuff really, really fast. And then you can go focus on more interesting problems. Okay. Like enhancing the apps with JavaScript, customizing them in some way. That's important. If you don't know JavaScript, so if you're not a coder, you're just like a typical business person who's not even technical, maybe you're even allergic to technology, you now have the opportunity to build something that was just out of reach for you before, which is what's so cool about this. Because now you can democratize access to I want to say democratize access to coding, but I don't want you to hear that in the wrong way, right? You can democratize access to technical empowerment, right? So what I mean is, think about it this way, right? So let's say you work on an IT team, right? Let's say you're in a big enterprise. Let's say you work for Microsoft and you're in the DevOps group, or you're an IT manager at like a hospital or something, okay? And you've got users, you've got people in the hospital or people in the company or in the bank or wherever it is that you're working, and they want stuff from you, right? And what typically happens is that IT teams are just jammed with lots and lots of requests from all of these different internal users. And they don't actually get to work on the projects that they see are the most important for the business, that would add the most value, because they're busy trying to close all these help desk tickets from all of these. I was going to say something not nice about these people, but they're just not technically empowered. They're not technical people. They're allergic to technology. That for us coders, they could be very frustrating people to deal with. And they need help. And so what we could do is, with a platform like Kintone, you could give them a solution. You could say, hey, listen, here's how you can self-serve. Okay. This is a safe sandbox for you to play, and we're going to pipe data in. And then you can create the apps that you need without coding, so that we, the technical people, can go focus on the stuff that is more interesting to us, is more valuable to like the reason why we're there, and everybody wins. So democratizing technical empowerment is what's possible over here. And what that ultimately does from a data analytics perspective is fulfilling the promise of what you were there to be doing in the first place, which is to get meaningful access, to get meaningful insights about the data and have those insights become operationalized quickly, right? That, that if you're a technical person, you can build something really quick and have it be really insightful and have those insights be propagated effectively, just like people are hoping. If you're not technical, then you can, build something that works well enough that you can take care of it by yourself and then leave the technical people to do the business that they really want to be doing. That's what we're talking about over here. That's the big picture, and that's the background for everything that we're going to be talking about today. Zechariah, I love your enthusiasm. That is so awesome. Just keep chugging along with us, man. So if you're a developer, here's how you can contribute, right? So what Kintone allows you to do is essentially two things, right? One is to create a custom look and feel, like make Kintone a command center where you can pipe in data from these other third-party web applications, and then you can have people interact with the Kintone platform like this is their main hub of their main operational hub for like all the stuff that they've got to track, all the people that they've got to talk to, getting the automated reminders, tracking items in workflows, seeing that in graphs and charts, adding snazzy data visualizations. That's their operation, their business operations hub. From an enhancement perspective as a developer, you can also create extensions and you can share those extensions. You could sell those extensions. You can develop JavaScript customizations, of which we'll be doing one today as an example. So you can make the platform more powerful than just what the native functionality allows. And that's why we're talking to you, because we see that you guys are the key to you are the answer to business people's prayers. And maybe that's not what you're looking for, and that's totally fine. If that's not interesting to you, like, please go do what you're interested in. But you guys have an incredible skills, and when we want to give you more powers to deliver on your demand. So inside of Kintone, you've got different kinds of tools. There's JavaScript API, there's a REST API tokens, webhooks, all sorts of stuff that's baked in for you to pass data into and out of our tool, based on various kinds of triggers and whatnot. And you can pretty much anything that you see, you can change with JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. And of course, you've got permission control, so you can make sure that you're allocating access appropriately. So by custom look and feel, I really meant you can change everything. So on the left-hand side, we've got an example of a chart. We're going to be doing a different kind of chart today. We're doing US presidents, but hell, you could do a bubble cloud. You can even play Space Invaders over here, which is a really neat little build that Will did a while back. That's one of the coolest things that I've seen being done with Kintone, is just like uploading some assets and creating and putting up some JavaScript. Best game of all time. I don't know, man. My heart is I think Zelda Ocarina of Time really has my heart on this one, but sure, I can understand Space Invaders is for some people. It's fair. Okay, so what does this mean to you? Well, so if you're a developer, you can use Kintone for self-learning, right? You can use it to learn more JavaScript stuff. You can use it to contribute your learnings to tech blogs. You can share your projects with your community. This is, out of our developer ethos, or maybe out of your interest to make yourself more marketable. It's great. You could do all of those things. If you've got a more business-minded perspective, I've kind of been speaking to you this whole time. But if I haven't been, but if this isn't you, like, I want you to know that's okay also. But if you're looking to have be Kintone as use Kintone as a resource for you to generate revenue, you can create and sell Kintone extensions. You can consult with firms on achieving their business goals, and then use Kintone as like a really effective way to deliver on their technical pain points. And then you can also develop Kintone customizations for customers. So all of these are on the table for you as opportunities, whether you're looking to generate revenue or whether you're looking to learn and get better as a developer. And so where does this come, where does all this come together when it comes to no servers? Well, with Kintone, somebody had mentioned, they wanted to back off on the back end stuff. So Kintone can essentially act as your back end, running your, running your database. Basically, it actually allows you to create databases with the GUI, like I briefly showed you, and like we'll get into more detail on. And then it'll also allow you to concentrate on the front end work. Okay, so that's the big picture. Let's keep trucking. As I mentioned, a Kintone app, you can imagine like a table in a database, or like a spreadsheet in an Excel workbook. There's a lot of different kinds of databases that we're going to make, or that we could make. And so what we're going to do is first we're going to go over the steps to build an app, and then we'll turn it over to you to build as an exercise. Okay, so you can follow along, and we'll make sure we'll give you time at the end to do this yourself. If you have not done this already, guys, this is really, really critical. Please make sure you've signed up for a developer account. Please make sure you've created a Kintone subdomain. When we turn the reins over to you to try this by yourself, you're going to be dead in the water if you don't have these two things handled. So please go ahead and do them now if you have not done that already. Genji, can you go ahead and drop those links in the chat again? And then if you have any trouble, doing either of those things, please post in the chat, and Genji or Will take care of you. Once you do those things, you'll see email coming into your inbox. So you'll see like welcome to Kintone, one more step too, and then you'll go ahead and you'll activate that, and then your subdomain, in your browser search bar, you'll type in your subdomain.kintone.com, whatever string you put over here, and then you'll log in and you'll get access. When you do that, okay, you'll log in and you'll see that there are two buttons that can take you either to the administration or to Kintone. You'll click on Kintone, and now you'll be in our portal. Okay, this is the first screen that people see when they log on to Kintone. This is where you would have your information front and center if this were like a production environment. Right now you can imagine it as a blank canvas that needs to be filled. What we're going to do is we're going to fill it with our first app, and we're going to do that by clicking on the plus sign over here. Once we do that, we'll be taken to the app creation screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an app from scratch. This isn't always what you might want to do. You may have a CSV file that you can just drop in via import and get a lot of data and a schema in at the same time. But we're going to create an app from scratch this time. And once we do, we'll be taken to the form builder. And you can see over here, we've got like a palette of different fields and a canvas. Okay, we are going to, our first app in Kintone is going to be a board game DB. It's going to be a one table. It's an app. An app is one table. It's a board game DB. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on where it says new app, and you're going to change the name to board game DB. Okay. Once you do that, you're going to drag and drop your first field from the palette to the canvas, and it's going to be a text field. You'll drag and drop it in, and then you'll notice if you hover over it, there's a gear wheel at the top right corner. The gear wheel will drop a menu, will drop a context menu, and you'll click on settings. Then you'll be taken to the field settings. All we're going to do is we're going to replace the name. And it's going to go from text to name. And then you hit OK. All right, so we've dropped our first field in our first app. Then we'll do our second field. We're going to pick a drop-down field. We'll drag it from the palette to the canvas, drag it to the middle, open up the field settings by clicking on the gear wheel at the top right corner of the page. And then we're going to change some of those options in the drop-down. So where we see sample one, so first of all, we're going to change the name. We're going to change it to type. And then we're going to change these options, sample 1 and sample 2, to abstract and area control. So these are types of board games. Now I want to point something out over here that you might be wondering if you've got eagle eyes, and that's what are these field codes? Okay, I'm bringing this up because it's going to come up later as we get into the code. Basically, so each one of these fields in Kintone, you can name it whatever you want to name it, and you can also duplicate name, but somewhere ultimately we need some way of uniquely identifying each field. Kintone needs to guarantee that we can distinctly refer to each one of these fields on the back end. And so these field codes are our way of doing that. And the field codes are automatically given certain values, and you can change them later. We're actually just going to keep them the way that they are now, but you could change them. Okay. Once you do that, you're going to click Activate App. This is going to deploy our app into production, and that's it. That's how we go from development to production. We drag and drop a bunch of fields, we change the settings in a GUI, we hit an Activate App button, and we're done. Okay. Now we go back to the portal, and you can see that this Board Game DB app that we just created is available in our list of apps. Well done. And now any user who can log onto the platform can see and play with this app. And we can, of course, change permissions later, but by default, it's available to everybody. I want to show you for a moment what it looks like when an app is populated. Remember I said a table in a database or a spreadsheet in a workbook? That's pretty much what we see over here. We've got our columns, in other words, our fields. We've got the data as on each row, like a record. If we wanted to add new data, we can click a plus sign over here. If we wanted to drill down into the specific record to look at more of the fields and the conversations that are pertaining to that particular record, we could do so by clicking on this little blue thumbnail. And if we wanted to go into more settings, we could click on that gear wheel with the white background over here. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to you at this point, and go ahead, follow these instructions. It brings us to the segment on displaying amCharts on Kintone. Okay, so let's dive into amCharts. So I talked about data visualization libraries. There's one that's very famous for use with JavaScript called D3. amCharts is another one. This one is a JavaScript HTML5 charts and maps data visualization library for websites, applications. It's fast, it's stylish, it's responsive. Lots of different kinds of charts and maps for better data visualization. Now, typically, when you're using a library in JavaScript on the front end, okay, there are a few parts there were a few parts that we had to make sure we hit all of these parts in order for the library to get instantiated and used appropriately. So first is the libraries on the JavaScript side have got to get read in somehow. Hired for it? You're probably like a lot of. Thanks, Trina. So the libraries got to get read in somehow. We've got to then in the JavaScript define the details of the chart and define the data, and hook that into like a div or something on the HTML side, so that this JavaScript knows what element to operate on and do stuff with. So all these four things need to happen typically on the front end. But when you're using Kintone, a lot of this is already taken care of for you. You don't need to define the div because we're going to use the Kintone platform's HTML. We don't need to put in the script tag because we can do that with the GUI. We don't need to define the data because the data is already in Kintone. All we need to do is define the chart details. And that's what we're going to spend our time doing today. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a new app from a CSV. And then we're going to add that JavaScript customization that we're talking about. That's going to use the amCharts library, and then we're going to be able to do this cool data visualizations. So what we'll do is very much like what we've already done. I'll go over the steps to build the app, then we'll turn it over to you as an exercise. And this part has got four steps. So first we're going to create a new Kintone app from a CSV. We're going to import the data from a CSV into Kintone. It's going to pull in the data and a schema. Then we're going to add the amCharts libraries to the app. We're going to do that in the GUI. We'll add a custom JavaScript file to the app, also in the GUI, and then we'll redeploy the app and we'll see the fruits of our labor. Let's start with step one, creating a new Kintone app from a CSV file. Okay, so make sure you get the file from this URL. Genji, could you please drop that URL in the chat, please? Thank you, thank you. So you're going to go ahead and get it from this gist bit.ly/KDP underscore timeline. And you're looking for a file called 01 underscore data.csv. And then you'll download it. There it is. Thanks, Genji. From there, once you've downloaded that CSV, you're going to create a new Kintone app very, very similarly to what you the first few steps that you did the first time. In your portal, you'll click on the plus sign. You will then be taken to the new app creator page. And instead of clicking create app from scratch, instead of doing the thing that you did, we're going to do something new. We're going to click create from CSV. So you'll create from CSV. And how will you create from CSV? Well, you'll click on that button and then you'll click continue. So this is taking you through a wizard, which is explaining to you how you need to format a CSV to make sure that Kintone will read it appropriately. Once you click continue, it'll walk you through those steps. We've got all this already taken care of for you. You just need to click check all. And once you do, you'll say continue, you'll click on that blue button, continue to the upload screen. Okay, you'll browse your file system to find that CSV file that you downloaded, and then Kintone will begin the initializing process. It will show you a few records of sample data to make sure so that you can see that it's being rendered, it's being interpreted the way that you want, the way that you're expecting. And then there'll be a place where you will map columns to fields. So whatever the column names are of the CSV, they will map to certain fields. What you're going to do over here, certain field types. So like a text field being mapped to a text field, a column being mapped to a dropdown. In fact, that's what we're going to change over here. We've got a column over here in the original data called party, and we want to change that from a text field to a dropdown field. Okay, this will allow us to use the quick filtering in Kintone's built-in interface. It's not going to affect the code. It's just for the Kintone user interface. So you'll go ahead and you'll change party to dropdown. And then you'll click convert. And that's how we're going to get our app. Okay, so in just a few clicks, we've taken a whole bunch of data and we've imported the schema and we've imported the data and we've created an app. And what we're going to do next is add the amCharts library to the app. So if you've done this all correctly and you're with me up to here, and it's okay if you're not with me up to here because you're going to get time to do this in just a bit, but I'm going through all of this stuff first. Okay. You'll see, oh, wow, I've got a new app over here in my portal. It's called 01 underscore data. This is exactly what I'm expecting to see. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to click into that app and take a look at what we've got. We have got a populated app. It's already got the data in it. This is a good sign. This is a really good sign. We're going to go into these app settings by clicking on that gear wheel over here. And we're going to click on where it says app settings, the app settings tab. And we'll go to click on an option called JavaScript and CSS customization. this is where we're doing the GUI side of the script tags, basically. Okay, so instead of having JavaScript and we go script blah 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 slash script for as many scripts as we're looking for, we're putting that information here in the JavaScript and CSS customization. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add these 6 links here. We're going to click add link, and then we add the link, and then we click save, and then we add another link. Okay, and we copy and paste that information over here. Make sure that https:// is only in there once. I've certainly been burned having it twice, and I'm being like, why isn't my code working? It's because my initial link wasn't formatted correctly. Then you'll click save, and you'll do this for all 5 of these libraries. And now we add our custom JavaScript file. So the way that we do that is we're going to go into the gist. The link, Kenji still has the link over here in the chat, and you'll download 03_script.js. You'll find it in your file system, and then over here in your JavaScript and CSS customization, instead of clicking add link, you'll click add file. You'll add 03_script right over here. Make sure that this file and that these links are ordered exactly in this way. And then you'll hit save at the top left. We're almost done. Right now, what we've done is we've saved our progress in a staging environment. And now we're going to click update app, and we're going to push those changes from staging to production. And when we do, this should be our payoff. We should get a timeline of different U.S. presidents that we can zoom into specific chunks of that timeline. We can scroll in, scroll out. That's what our payoff is for today. Okay. As Captain Planet once said, the power is yours. Go ahead. Okay, folks, we're going to go through the code. Now, a lot of this code, remember, this is the code for creating the details of the chart. So there's a lot of like parameters that we're going to configure to have the chart look the way that it does. We're not going to go through all of those parameters. We're going to go through many of them. If you want more details, go into the gist and click on that link, and you'll and it'll walk you through some more detail on what each of these different chart configuration parameters do. Now we'll start with the libraries that you linked to or uploaded into Kintone. So from top to bottom, they do the following things. So first is going to load the core amCharts library. Then we've got the basics of the charts. There's an extension that will allow us to have the chart take that serpentine, that timeline shape. We have another resource that will create those pin bullets with icons, those little those things that you drop when you go on Google Maps, those pointers, but they're not pointers, pin bullets. And then automatic transitions is what that 5th one does. And the 6th one is going to be the custom script that we are building, or we're going to be going through in some detail right now. Oh, let me add one more thing, which is that these libraries are going to load on any page of the app, including like the list of records that we're looking at, as well as if you go into the details of any specific record, you'll be able to the objects that are put into the global scope from these files will be available on each page in the app. Okay. Now let's go into the code. If you'd like, you can follow along with the code in your console or in an IDE or in your favorite text editor. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. You're gonna hate yourself. You're gonna like mess up with your smart quotes and stuff. Like, don't ever code inside of Microsoft Word. Oh man. Some people just want to watch the world burn. Okay, so here we are inside of your code. Hopefully you're using a tool like Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text or something like that. Um, and what you'll see, first of all, is that this whole code is located inside of an immediately invoked function expression, an IFI. What this does is it actually it localizes the scope of everything in this file to be only in this file. That's why it's there. There are other files that we've used where we've got objects hanging out in the global scope, but inside of this custom JavaScript file, we don't have that. Everything's local. The first, this line that you'll notice, kintone.events.on. Let me tell you a story about that. So there you are inside of the internet, and you're building behavior on web pages, and you want to set you want to set certain behavior to go off on certain triggers, like on page load, for example. Um, well, there's like Kintone event, or sorry, there's like web event triggers. There's web events that do that, and Kintone has another layer of events built on top of those browser events. We call those Kintone events, shockingly. Um, and Kintone events trigger on certain um, on certain things happening. Like we are looking at a record list page. We are editing a record. We are saving a record. We are in a record details page. Alex, were the slides provided? Absolutely. Genji, could you please link Alex to the slides? Uh, and so what happens is we say, okay, on this event triggering, please do the following. And by the way, we're going to pass in the parameter for the event so that we can use it as needed. So that's what's happening first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up this div. So remember on typical front page web development, you've got an HTML file. There's some element somewhere that you're going to hook into and like do some behavior on. In Kintone, we want to get the space element. We want to get this area that is above the record list. And that's called the header space element. And we're going to use a method that that Kintone already exposes, and it's going to get that div. We're going to save it as a variable and then begin to style it accordingly. You can give it a border and some color, give it a certain height and size. And I mentioned that we've got this event object, right? You can see this event object right over here. This Kintone passes it in as a parameter. And remember, again, on a front page, on a typical front end development job, you've got this HTML file you're hooking behavior into. You've got some place where you need to capture the chart details, and you've got and then at some point you need to define the data. So remember, we already have data inside of Kintone. It's there. We just need to know how to get it. And it's actually in the event object. It's a property in the event object. And that property is called the records property. So what you can do is you can go into your browser console, please do this, and type into the console event.records, and you'll be presented with an array of 46 objects, each one of which is an object. Well, yeah, each one of which is an object that has information in it. Information like when did I create this record, what user created this record, as well as some data that's more pertinent to us, like what's the name of this president, and when did they become president, and when did they stop becoming the president. So you'll see that. So your entire array will be filled with records that look like this. And we're going to keep going. So what you see next is us beginning to call the objects that are in the global scope that we pulled in from these amCharts scripts, like am4 core, am4 plugins underscore timeline, am4 themes underscore animated. These were all put into the scope by these other libraries that we instantiated before we got to our sample code. Okay. So am4themes underscore animated, it's gonna automatically animate the many of these charts. It's gonna make them look snazzy. And then this chart variable is us instantiating the chart. We're gonna start doing stuff to it. And then we're gonna indicate the number of lines that are basically like the number of rows that the serpent has. Okay, so from here, we now want to get the data that's stored in these Kintone records. Remember, we just talked about event.records, and we want to pass it into amCharts in a way that's useful, right? So we need to pass that information to chart.data, which is where amCharts expects the data to live. So we need to create a pipe between the event.records, the event the data that's in event.records that we want to pick off, and then then we need to shape it in a certain way so that it can be put onto chart.data in a way that amCharts expects. So how are we going to do that? Well, first let's take a look at event.records. So we did that. We did event.records. Now we're looking at chart.data, and you'll see that we've got an array of objects that look very much like this. And for those of you who don't know, the map method is a method that that lives on the native array object and lets us do a one-to-one transformation of items in one array to items in another array. Said differently, the map method, you can, any array, for all intents and purposes, any array has a map method. And what that map method will do is it'll let you take the array that you have, create a new array with exactly the same number of items, and then change the first item to look like a different first item in the new array. Change the second item to look like a different second item in the second array. That's called map. Okay. So what you see we need over here, we need the president's name and the start date and the end date, and the color, like what party they belong to, and then the image. So that's exactly what we've got over here. Okay. Now you might wonder, okay, what does all this mean? This is not intuitive. So let's break this down. Okay, we'll start and end date. This is pretty intuitive. And we've got this thing called rec.date.value, rec.date_0.value, rec.text.value. Where is all this coming from? As well as the parties, the party colors, rec.dropdown. We're setting this president's icon. Let's talk about that. Okay. So you'll notice we've got some things. Not quite sure what these are. Text, drop down, date _0. This might look a little familiar. Well, about an hour ago, we had this conversation about field codes. Okay. And we said that fields on the back end in Kintone ultimately need to be uniquely identified. And we identify them with field codes. And so what we do is we can see them here inside of the event.records object. Oops. Okay. And you'll see like date corresponds with the start date, date _0, which is just Kintone's, like when you drag and drop another date field out, or Kintone automatically creates a date field and you don't name it anything else, it's just going to increment a number after the type of field that it is. So the same thing you'll see with first name and last name, party. Remember, this is a drop down, and then the wiki URL, this is a link. Okay. So in this way, what we're seeing over here is the text that goes above the pin bullet is going to be the name of the president. So there's this object called text, which corresponds to our field, right? Text. And this object has properties in it, value, type. So we can ascertain what type of field it is, what is the value of the field, um, and with a script break if someone renames a field code. Hey, RJ, that's a really great observation. You are correct. If someone renames a field code, you need to change the field codes on the corresponding customization side. Now, when you have a very sophisticated customization, what we do is we've got like I've got like a if I've got a project that I've got a specific file where I'm holding all of those where I'm holding all those relationships between the actual field code name and whatever the guts of the code is going to use. So I might have like president underscore name be equal to whatever the value of the field code is, and then use president underscore name in all of my inside code that's not exposed to the value of the field code. So basically, I'm using a variable in all of the rest of my code, and I've got one place where I can manage the placement of that, where I can manage the updating of that field code. Great question, RJ. In any case, now you can start to see what's happening over here. I've got the value of the president's name, the value of the president's party, the value of the start date, the value of the end date, the value of this well, this is a little bit more. This is like the name of the Genji set up these images so that the name of the file corresponds with the record number in Kintone. So that way it can automatically go in. Okay. And then what happens is we've got these parameters, records that are getting pushed into the map function. So that's why rec shows up over here, rec.date.value. So this is basically saying in my record list for this particular item in the array, find me the start date object and get me the value of the start date. So folks, that's the payoff of everything that I was just talking about in the last like 7 minutes about what the mystery is behind here, okay? This map function, I'm passing in my record list. Then for a specific item in the record list, I've got this start date that corresponds to a field code inside of Kintone, but the object associated with that field code has other properties in it, type, value, etc. So I need to get the value of that. And that's how all of this works to get my data into Kintone, sorry, from Kintone into amCharts, such that the pipe works. Okay, that was a major part of the understanding. If you guys can understand how that happens, then a lot of the rest of this is just configuration of the chart. And that's what we're going to talk some more about. So we've got a y-axis, and so we've got this part of the code that talks about these categories. Okay, so a category, it's not relevant in our example, but if it were, maybe we would have like presidents in one category and like turtles in another, and then we can track like presidents in the timeline of presidents, and then we can track, I don't know, like the lives of the tortoises in another category. In this case, Jonathan the tortoise was born in 1832, still alive, the oldest animal on land, over 189 years old. And just a heads up, we made the opacity 100% to clearly show these category segments. Now we've got the date axis. So this is the x-axis. I was just reading about Jonathan this morning. Wow, that is super well timed, Zachariah. You're like on the level today, man.
Were you
So
also
line
on Reddit?
70s. Coinky dink. What was that? It was Reddit today?
It was posted on Reddit last night. That's when I figured this out. Sorry.
Genji, you're telling us all your secrets. And we've outed you as a Reddit reader. Okay, line 76, date axis. This is the actual x-axis that lays out the year. We set the text to be in the center of the line. We made it a dash line. And so that's what these parameters alter. And then we want to handle the start and end dates, like the gray segment that showcases the the delta between the start date and the end date, the time between the start date and the end date. And so that's where you've got this is telling amCharts that the start property on the object we've put into the pipeline, that's where we have the start date, and that end property is where we're going to finish that part of the data series. And then the pin bullets, that's what sets up these little things. We are setting the pin bullet at the start of the presidential term by setting the location X to 1. And then we get the color and the image information from chart.data from the slide that I showed you previously. So that's how we know, oh, it looks like this. The picture looks like this. Just so you know, the am4core.image method. This is in the core library. So what this does, image, this function creates an image object, and that handles importing and displaying graphics onto the chart. So that's how we were able to get this snazzy picture of George Washington onto this pin bullet. And just so you know that this href property over here, this can take in a URL, base64, and an SVG path. Okay, then the text bullets. Now we need to put a name on top of these pin bullets. Okay, so we got that from, if you remember, from our data pipe. In fact, let me pull up our data pipe right now. There it is. So here's our data pipe. Remember? So we just talked about start and end. I talked about color and icon, which is where amCharts knows what properties to pick off over here so that it can interpret them correctly. And then text, this is the name of our president, which you see right over here. And then we align that text in the middle and give it the appropriate the height. So the dy gives it the height of the text from the time axis. You can see how there's a lot of like parameters. Like amCharts is a very powerful tool. We don't need to mess with all of this, but it's certainly available if you need to. Then we have a scroll bar. This was what allowed us to zoom into a certain chunk of the timeline. And this is all of the information that allow us to do that, all the parameters we can play with to do that. And then we've got a tooltip that we can hover over. It gets us the year and the month, and we get the date axis. The date axis provides the tooltip data. There's an optional chart exporting we can do. This is a cool functionality that amCharts lets you do, where you can export the chart that you see into different kinds of export formats, image formats, or sometimes Excel, CSV as well. And these are the parameters that'll allow you to make those changes or to even turn this on in the first place. We're at the home stretch, folks. What have we done today? We've talked about how Kintone's a no-code, low-code platform. We hooked you guys up with a free Kintone developer license and gave you a big picture for like how that might help you with your studies or with your if you're looking to make some money. We talked about data analytics. We talked about the essential intent of data analytics and the way that it can get thwarted by not having communication and conversations in your data be properly organized. We talked about creating databases with no coding by creating Kintone apps and then customizing them with JavaScript. We ran some client-side executed JavaScript files to create a data visualization library, and that the JavaScript can interact with data that's stored in these Kintone apps. And then we talked about how to get data from other sources and pull them into Kintone with these client side executed REST API calls. And then how you can use the Kintone.proxy method to bypass these CORS errors. So that's a lot. That's a ton of stuff we just covered in 2 hours. I really, I trust that it was an excellent use of your time. Are all apps on Kintone going to be single table apps? Not to cover it here, but can code be written that joins 2+ tables? RJ, that's a terrific question. So each app on Kintone is its, you can imagine it like its own table. It's got its own schema. Now but you can relate apps to each other, and you can uh, and you can do that in a few ways. You can do that by using something called a lookup, which is like a one-to-one pull of data. So um, I'll leave it there for now. You've also have something called related records, which allow me like a many to one window into another app. You could create an app that is populated by like, using the Open Kintone API, I can like fetch records over there, fetch records over here. I can combine them, pipe with them, whatever I want to do, and then post them into a specific app use. You can absolutely do that. There are definitely ways to like uh, join data together on the GUI side and on the and definitely on the JS side. For those who are looking for next projects to work on, amCharts has a lot more visualization projects. There's a ton more public APIs that are available that you can do some cool stuff with. We've got some suggestions for you if you wanted to mash Kintone up with Node.js and have Node call Kintone's REST APIs. You can check that out over here. You've got Stack Overflow and the Kintone Developer Community Forum, which if you post a question on the Kintone Developer Community Forum, you will get an answer. We've got people who are paid to make sure that you get answers to those questions. So that'll guarantee that you get an answer to that.
So I just want to thank everyone for joining today. I want to also say thank you to our community partners, Hack Buddy by JavaScript LA and Flatiron School. We do have an upcoming workshop on March 18th, and you'll want to join us for that. So go ahead and go to that bit.ly on your screen, and you can find that event. The Eventbrite's out now already.
Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your attention. None of us take it for granted. We all want to make sure that we give you excellent content, and we are looking forward to seeing you again soon